The arrival. The jungle planet of Karthos looked peaceful from space, but everyone in the Velkari Empire knew the truth. It was a death world. Thick green forests covered its surface like a living ocean. Giant trees blocked the sunlight. Mist moved slowly between the branches. Deep inside that jungle lived creatures so dangerous that even the Velkari war fleets avoided landing there without heavy weapons. Above the planet, the royal warship Star of Velkar floated in orbit. It was large, silver, and shaped like a blade. Inside the command deck, Princess Aelira stood tall before the wide glass window. She was young, proud, and confident. This was her first independent mission, and she wanted to prove she was strong enough to lead. Behind her, officers moved quietly. Holographic maps of the jungle glowed in the air. Red warning signs marked areas where Velkari scouts had disappeared in the past. Even the best hunters of her empire had failed to tame Karthos. Today, something unusual was happening. A small human shuttle entered the planet's atmosphere. The princess watched it burn through the clouds. "That is it?" she asked, her voice calm but amused. "Yes, Your Highness," one officer replied. "Single shuttle. One life sign detected." "Only one?" she said. "Yes, a human." The princess smiled slightly. She had studied many species during her training. Humans were new to the larger galactic stage. They were adaptable, clever, and sometimes unpredictable. But still, they were young compared to the Velkari Empire. "And they send only one?" she asked again. The officer nodded. The shuttle landed in a clearing deep inside the jungle. No escort ships, no heavy weapons, no visible defense systems. The princess let out a small laugh. "Just a rookie," she said. "They must not take us seriously." The human shuttle door opened. Cameras zoomed in. A single figure stepped out onto the dark soil. He wore light field armor. No heavy exosuit. No visible advanced weapons. Just a small pack on his back and a device attached to his belt. He removed his helmet slowly and looked around at the jungle as if he were walking into a park on a quiet morning. Princess Aelira folded her hands behind her back. "Does he understand where he is?" she asked. "This region contains at least 7 classified apex predator species," an officer answered. "Most attack on sight." The jungle around the human was thick and silent. No wind, no bird calls, no movement. Then something changed. The sensors began to react. "Movement detected," said another officer. "Multiple large life forms approaching." The princess leaned forward slightly. "Finally," she whispered. Through the camera feed, massive shapes moved between the trees. One creature stepped into view. It was enormous, with armored skin and 6 glowing eyes. Its claws were long enough to cut through metal. Behind it, 2 more creatures appeared. Their bodies were low and wide, built for speed. Their mouths opened slightly, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "These are Karthos apex hunters," the officer said. "They do not retreat." The human did not run. He did not reach for a weapon. He simply stood there, watching them. Princess Aelira waited for the attack. The first predator stepped closer. 5 meters, 4, 3. The princess smiled, expecting blood. But the creature stopped. It tilted its head slightly. Then slowly, it stepped to the side. The second predator did the same. The third followed. None of them attacked. Instead, they created a clear path through the jungle. The command deck fell silent. "Is that fear?" one officer whispered. The princess's smile faded. "Impossible," she said quickly. The human adjusted the strap on his shoulder and began walking forward. The predators moved back as he passed them. Not running, not showing panic, just stepping aside, as if making room. More creatures appeared in the distance, larger ones, some so big their bodies blocked entire trees, yet none of them moved toward him. The jungle that once hunted everything was now quiet. "Run a fear analysis," the princess ordered. Negative, replied the officer after a moment. Hey, stress signals are low. Their heart rates are stable. Then why are they retreating? She demanded. No one answered. The human paused in the center of the clearing. He looked around once more. Then he slowly raised his head. His eyes lifted toward the sky, toward the warship in orbit. For a brief moment, it felt as if he could see them through the clouds. Princess Alara felt something she had not expected. Uncertainty. The human gave a small, almost casual smile. Not proud, not afraid, just calm. Open communication channels, the princess said firmly. Let us hear what this rookie has to say. But before the signal could connect, the sensors reacted again. More movement, an officer said, voice tight. Dozens of additional apex signatures forming a perimeter. The screen showed the impossible, and the most dangerous predators of Karthos were gathering around the human, not as enemies, but as silent guardians. Princess Alara stared at the image. She had come to this world ready to prove her strength. Instead, she was watching a single human walk through a death world untouched. Her fingers tightened slightly behind her back. Prepare a ground response team, she ordered calmly, though her voice had lost its earlier humor. If he believes we will be impressed by tricks, he is mistaken. Below, the human continued walking deeper into the jungle, and every apex predator stepped aside to let him pass. The test Princess Alara did not allow silence to control her command deck for long. She had trained her entire life to lead warriors, not to stand frozen by confusion. Even if the jungle behaved strangely, she refused to believe a single human could command a death world. She straightened her posture and gave her next order without hesitation. An elite Velkari strike unit would descend immediately. They would surround the human, restrain him, and bring him aboard the Star of Velkar. It would be clean, controlled, and quick. Whatever illusion the human had created would end the moment trained soldiers entered the field. The strike unit chosen for the mission was not ordinary. These were veterans who had hunted on toxic moons and survived gravity storms on collapsing planets. Their armor was dark and reinforced, designed to resist claws, acid, and crushing force. Their weapons were calibrated to disable large beasts without damaging valuable biological samples, though they moved with discipline and confidence as their drop craft launched from the warship and pierced the cloud layer. Princess Alara watched closely from the command deck. She folded her hands again, but this time there was no smile on her face. The drop craft landed several kilometers from the human's last known position. The soldiers advanced through thick jungle terrain, scanning constantly. Their helmets transmitted live visual feeds back to the warship. Strange plants covered the ground like woven metal cables. Giant trees blocked out most of the sunlight, casting everything in green shadow. The air was heavy and damp, yet the strangest thing was not the environment. It was the silence. No growls, no hunting cries, no sudden movement in the brush. The jungle felt alert, as if it were watching. "We contact in sight," the squad leader reported calmly. The camera zoomed through leaves and thick vines. The human stood in a wide, natural clearing surrounded by towering trees. He had removed his gloves and was touching the bark of one tree as if studying it. He did not appear nervous. He did not appear surprised by the approaching soldiers. The Velkari unit spread into formation, surrounding him from multiple angles. Weapons were raised, but not yet fired. "Human," the squad leader announced through amplified speakers. "You are trespassing in Velkari-controlled territory. Surrender peacefully." The human slowly turned his head. His face was relaxed. There was no anger in his expression, no fear either. He simply observed them for a moment as if measuring something invisible. Then the ground began to vibrate. At first it was subtle, like distant thunder. The soldiers adjusted their stance automatically, scanning for incoming threats. Motion alerts lit up across their helmet displays. Large life forms were approaching again, but this time they were not staying hidden behind trees. One massive predator stepped into the clearing, then another, and another. Within seconds, the clearing was ringed by creatures far larger than the first group Princess Elira had seen. These were older, heavier, covered in scars. Their eyes did not glow with hunger. They burned with awareness. The Velkari soldiers turned outward, shifting their formation to face the incoming beasts, their weapons locked onto targets. "Permission to engage?" the squad leader asked sharply. Princess Elira hesitated for only half a second. "Hold fire unless attacked," she commanded. She needed answers, and not chaos. The predators did not charge. They did not roar. They walked slowly into position, forming a wide circle around the clearing. Their movements were deliberate and calm. Some lowered their massive heads slightly. Others sat back on powerful limbs. It was not a hunting stance. It was something else. The human stepped forward once, placing himself between the Velkari squad and the nearest predator. He did not draw a weapon. He simply raised one hand slightly, palm outward. The nearest predator stopped moving. The second predator mirrored the action. The entire perimeter froze. Princess Elira felt her throat tighten. "What is he doing?" she asked quietly. "Energy readings minimal," an officer replied. "No visible control signals, no neural override detected." The squad leader tried again. "Human. Now step away from the creatures." The human spoke for the first time, his voice transmitted clearly through open comm channels. "You are not in control here," he said calmly. His tone was not threatening. It was factual. "They are not yours to command." Before the Velkari soldiers could respond, every weapon in their hands flickered. Systems glitched. Target locks vanished. One by one, their rifles powered down completely. "Technical failure," the squad leader reported, confusion entering his voice for the first time. "Weapons offline." The predators did not move closer. They did not attack the now vulnerable soldiers. They simply watched. The human looked at the squad leader directly. "I suggest you step back," he said in the same calm voice. "You are disturbing the balance." Princess Elira's heart beat faster, though she refused to show fear. This was no simple rookie, no basic scout. He stood unarmed in the center of apex predators and elite soldiers, yet he looked like the only one who truly understood the situation. The squad leader slowly ordered a tactical withdrawal. Without functioning weapons and surrounded by unknown biological forces, remaining in position was a risk. The Velkari unit retreated carefully, never turning their backs completely. The predators parted again, allowing a narrow path for their exit. Not a single creature attacked. Not one growled. When the soldiers reached safe distance and their drop craft lifted back toward orbit, the jungle slowly returned to silence. The predators lowered themselves to the ground once more, almost as if the event had never happened. On the command deck, no one spoke for several long seconds. Princess Elira stared at the human on the main screen. He had already turned away from the retreating soldiers and resumed walking deeper into the forest, as if the entire confrontation had been a minor interruption. She had called him a rookie. Now she was no longer certain what that word meant. The truth about humans. The command deck of the Star of Velkar no longer carried the quiet confidence it had before. The officers moved carefully now, their voices lower, their eyes returning again and again to the main screen where the human continued walking deeper into the jungle. Princess Elira stood still at the center of the room, but her thoughts were not calm. She had expected resistance, perhaps clever tactics or hidden technology. What she had not expected was obedience from creatures that obeyed nothing. The Velkari Empire had studied Karthos for decades. Every recorded attempt to control its wildlife had ended in failure. Drones had been destroyed. Heavy patrol units had vanished without distress signals. Even orbital scans could not fully map the ecosystem below because the jungle interfered with most tracking systems. Yet this single human moved through it as if he had walked there before. "Your Highness." A slow, steady voice spoke from behind her. It belonged to General Varric, the oldest military advisor aboard the ship. His scales were darker than most Velkari, marked by thin white lines that showed age and battle experience. He had served through 3 royal reigns and survived wars across half the known systems. "Speak," Elira said without turning. I believe we should review archived records regarding human military history," Varric said carefully. The princess finally faced him. "You think this display is military?" Varric's eyes remained fixed on the screen. "I think we are witnessing something we do not fully understand." Elira signaled for the archive to open. Holographic data streams filled the air between them. Human history was vast, messy, and difficult to summarize. They were not the strongest species physically. They were not the most advanced technologically, but their expansion pattern had drawn attention across the galaxy. "Humans originate from a classified high-risk planet," Varric began. "Environmental instability, violent weather systems, extreme temperature shifts, high predator population density." Elira narrowed her eyes slightly. "So many species come from harsh worlds." "Yes," Varric agreed, "but few survive long enough to dominate them." The hologram shifted to images of Earth. Storms the size of continents spun over oceans. Volcanic eruptions split mountains. Frozen wastelands stretched across polar regions. Massive predators once ruled its lands and seas. "Humans did not remove their apex predators immediately," Varric continued. "They learned them, studied them, hunted them, coexisted when necessary, eliminated when required." The princess crossed her arms slowly. "You are suggesting this is instinct." "I am suggesting," Varric replied, "that to a human, a death world is simply home." The command deck grew even quieter. Below them, the jungle canopy parted slightly as the human reached a higher ridge. Several large predators followed at a distance, not close enough to threaten, not far enough to ignore. "He shows no fear response," an officer reported. "Biometric scans indicate stable pulse and steady breathing." "Perhaps he is unaware of the danger," another officer suggested weakly. Varric shook his head slightly. "No, he is aware. That is the difference." Elira studied the human's movements carefully. He did not rush. He did not look over his shoulder constantly. His steps were measured and confident. At one point, a smaller but still dangerous predator moved too close. The creature's muscles tightened as if preparing to lunge. The human stopped walking. He turned slowly toward it. He held its gaze. For several seconds, neither moved. Then the predator lowered its head and stepped back. Elira felt a chill move across her spine. Pull up combat exchange data between humans and high-tier biological threats," she ordered. The hologram shifted again. Footage from various galactic conflicts appeared. Human soldiers fighting in environments others considered impossible. Swamps filled with toxic gases, frozen asteroid surfaces, underground tunnels controlled by aggressive insectoid species. In each clip, the pattern repeated. Humans adapted quickly. They studied enemy behavior. They used the terrain instead of resisting it. "They do not overpower nature," Varric said quietly. "They integrate into it." Elira's jaw tightened. "And you believe that is what we are seeing?" "Yes, Your Highness. This is not dominance through fear. It is recognition." The princess looked again at the human walking through Karthos. "See recognition of what?" Varric answered without hesitation. "A higher predator." The words hung in the air. Velkari doctrine taught that apex status was earned through strength, control, and victory. But what if apex meant something else? What if it meant survival through understanding? An officer interrupted the silence. New development. Long-range sensors detect unusual neural activity among the predators. Their brain patterns are synchronizing. Synchronized how? Elira demanded. Cooperative alignment, the officer replied. Like a network forming. The princess' confidence cracked slightly. You mean a pack? More organized than a pack, Varric corrected softly. More like a society. Below, the human reached the edge of a massive natural basin in the jungle. In the center of that basin stood a colossal predator, larger than any recorded specimen. Its body was covered in layered armor plates. Its eyes were deep and steady. The human walked directly toward it. The entire command deck leaned forward unconsciously. The massive creature did not charge. It did not threaten. It lowered its head slowly. The human extended one hand and placed it gently against the armored skin. Elira felt something shift inside her. This was no accident. No trick. No advanced weapon system was visible. No signals were detected. Whatever existed between the human and the apex predators was older than technology. Varric spoke again, voice firm now. Humans survived their world by becoming part of its hierarchy. If Karthos recognizes hierarchy, then it has already chosen. The princess stared at the screen, her earlier words echoing in her mind. Just a rookie. But what kind of empire sends a rookie into a death world alone? And what kind of species produces rookies that apex predators refuse to challenge? For the first time since arriving in orbit, Princess Elira was not thinking about conquest. She was thinking about caution. When the jungle chose Princess Elira remained standing at the center of the command deck, but the feeling in the room had changed completely. What had begun as amusement had turned into calculation. She was no longer trying to prove strength. Now she was trying to understand power. Below, the human still stood before the largest predator ever recorded on Karthos. The creature's body alone could crush armored vehicles. Its claws were longer than a Velkari soldier's arm. Yet it did not attack. It did not threaten. It waited. The human removed a small device from his belt. It was not large. It did not glow brightly. It made no visible energy surge. He simply held it in his hand and pressed one control surface. A soft pulse expanded outward. The command deck sensors immediately reacted, but not in alarm. Low-frequency signal detected, an officer reported. Non-invasive. It matches environmental rhythm patterns from earlier scans. Meaning? Elira asked sharply. It is synchronizing with the jungle's biological network. General Varric narrowed his eyes. He is not controlling them, he said slowly. He is speaking their language. Below, the massive predator made a deep sound, not a roar, but something more controlled, almost like a call. The surrounding creatures responded. Smaller predators moved into position along the ridges. The larger ones shifted to block natural choke points. It was not random movement. It was coordinated. Princess Elira felt the air on the command deck grow heavy. Is he forming a defense line? She asked. Yes, Your Highness, an officer answered after reviewing data. The predators are organizing into protective formation. Protective, Varric repeated quietly. The human stepped forward again and stood beside the massive creature rather than in front of it. He was not hiding behind the predator. He was standing with it. That single detail unsettled Elira more than anything else. Open wide-range planetary scans, she ordered. I want full biosphere mapping. The holographic display expanded. Across the entire continent, predator species were moving. Patterns appeared where none had existed before. And territorial boundaries were being adjusted. Migration routes were shifting. It was as if the jungle itself had awakened and chosen alignment. Your Highness, the science officer said carefully, this ecosystem is highly reactive to disruption. Our fleet's orbit, energy signatures, and expansion markers have likely triggered defensive behavior. "And the human?" she asked. "He appears to be recognized as non-hostile." The word struck her harder than any direct threat could have. Non-hostile. Elira had expected fear. She had expected chaos. Instead, she was witnessing unity. Below, the human finally looked upward again. His face remained calm, but there was no challenge in his expression. There was only certainty. A transmission request appeared on the command deck. "Incoming signal from the human," an officer announced. "Put it through," Elira said. The human's voice filled the command chamber, steady and clear. "Velkari Fleet, you have been observed. Your presence has caused stress in the biosphere. I suggest you reconsider further advancement." His tone was not angry. It was not emotional. It was professional. "You speak as if you command this world," Elira replied. "I do not command it," he answered. "I represent an agreement." The princess's eyes narrowed slightly. "Agreement with beasts?" "With a sentient ecosystem," the human corrected calmly. "You classified them as predators. You never classified them as organized." The command deck reacted quietly to that statement. Several officers exchanged uneasy glances. "Explain yourself," Elira demanded. This planet was designated protected status under a joint environmental treaty," the human said. "Your expansion markers violate that treaty." Varric looked sharply toward the princess. "Protected by whom?" she asked. "By humanity," the human replied without hesitation. Silence followed. Elira felt her pride push against the growing weight of reality. "And you enforce this protection alone?" A faint hint of something crossed the human's expression. Not amusement, but recognition of her misunderstanding. "I was sent to assess, not to fight." As if responding to his words, the jungle trembled again. But this time, it was not only predators. Massive tree roots shifted subtly, tightening the terrain. Vines moved across natural paths. Rock formations partially sealed narrow passes. The environment itself was adjusting. "Seismic readings increasing," an officer said. "But controlled. It is not random." The human continued speaking. "Your fleet has been measured. Your weapons have been calculated. The jungle is not afraid. It is prepared." Princess Elira's breath slowed. "Prepared for what?" "For defense," he answered simply. The massive predator beside him lifted its head and released a deep, resonating call. Across the holographic map, every predator's signature pulsed in synchronization. The princess felt the truth settle inside her. This was not about one human surviving a death world. This was about a species that had learned to partner with death worlds. "Scan for hidden fleets," she ordered suddenly. Long-range sensors expanded beyond the immediate orbit. For several seconds, nothing appeared. And then faint distortions emerged at the edge of detection range. "Cloaked signatures confirmed," an officer said, voice tight. "Multiple human vessels positioned at extreme distance." "How many?" Elira asked. "Enough," Varric answered before the officer could respond. Below, the human lowered his device. The predators relaxed slightly but did not disperse. They held formation. "You misunderstand something important," the human said through the open channel. "You assumed that because I came alone, I was weak." Elira did not reply immediately. He continued, his voice steady and controlled. "On Earth, rookies are trained where others would not survive. We do not send our best soldiers to death worlds. We send those still learning." The princess felt a slow realization unfold. This human was not their strongest, that he was their beginner. "And even the jungle steps aside for him," Varric murmured under his breath. The human gave a final statement before closing the transmission. "Withdraw peacefully and no conflict will occur. Continue expansion, and you will not face only predators." The signal ended. The jungle below remained still but alert. Princess Elira stared at the screen for a long moment. Her empire had conquered dozens of systems through strength and fear, but fear was not present here. Here, the jungle had chosen, and it had not chosen her. The real mission. The command deck remained silent long after the transmission ended. Princess Aelira stood unmoving, her eyes fixed on the image of the human below. The predators had not dispersed. They had not returned to their normal hunting patterns. They remained positioned around him. Not restless, not aggressive, but attentive. It was not the behavior of beasts guarding prey. It was the behavior of allies protecting something valuable. Aelira finally turned away from the screen and faced her officers. "He claims treaty protection," she said calmly, though her thoughts were far from calm. "Verify this." The data officers began searching through interstellar agreements and archived diplomatic records. The Velkari Empire had little interest in environmental treaties. Expansion had always taken priority over preservation, but within minutes, a restricted file surfaced. "Confirmed," one officer reported carefully. "There is a multi-species ecological protection pact signed 12 standard cycles ago. Humanity is listed as a primary enforcement authority for designated death worlds." Aelira's eyes hardened. We were not notified." "You were," General Varric said quietly, "but at the time, it was classified as low strategic importance." The princess understood what that meant. The Velkari High Council had dismissed it. A minor species protecting hostile planets did not seem like a threat. Now it did. "Open a secure channel," Aelira ordered. "Direct communication." The human's image appeared once more, clearer this time. The predators behind him remained visible, but calm. His posture had not changed. He did not look like someone standing in front of a superior fleet. He looked like someone standing exactly where he belonged. "You have verified the treaty," he said, not as a question, but as an observation. "We have," Aelira replied, "but your presence alone does not intimidate an empire." "I am not here to intimidate," he answered. I am here to prevent unnecessary loss." "Loss for whom?" she asked. "For you," he said simply. There was no arrogance in his voice, no threat, just certainty. Aelira stepped closer to the communication console. "Explain why a single human is enough to enforce planetary protection." The human paused briefly, choosing his words. "Because this world does not need my strength. It needs my understanding." Behind him, the massive apex predator shifted slightly, lowering its body into a resting position. Several smaller predators mirrored the movement. "You think they follow you?" Aelira asked. "They do not follow," he replied. "They respond." He turned slightly and gestured toward the jungle. "Your fleet's orbital signature triggered defensive synchronization across the ecosystem. Karthos is not random. It is structured. Apex species communicate through bioelectric and vibrational channels. I am trained to interpret those patterns." "Trained how?" she pressed. "On Earth," he answered, "in environments that tried to kill us for thousands of years." The princess studied him closely. "You are military." "I am an environmental integration specialist," he corrected calmly. "Entry level." The phrase unsettled her again. Entry level. "You are a rookie," she said slowly. "Yes," he confirmed. "And yet you stand before creatures that have destroyed our armored patrols." "Because you arrived as conquerors," he said. "I arrived as part of the system." Aelira did not like the simplicity of his answer. It removed the possibility of trickery. It suggested something deeper. "Your fleet remains cloaked," she observed. "For observation only," he said. "They are outside engagement range." "Yet within reinforcement distance." "Yes." The princess folded her hands again, but this time not in confidence, in thought. "If we ignore your warning?" The human met her gaze directly. "Then you will not be fighting animals. You will be fighting a coordinated planetary defense backed by a human response fleet. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. Elira turned to her officers. Simulate conflict outcome. Holographic projections filled the air. The jungle terrain limited heavy weapon use. Predator mobility exceeded Velkari ground units in dense forest. Human-cloaked ships could disable orbital advantage if fully deployed. Casualty projections rose rapidly. Projected loss unacceptable, one officer said quietly. General Varric stepped closer to the princess. Your Highness, my strength is not only measured by force applied, it is measured by force withheld. Elira's pride resisted the idea of withdrawal, but pride had no place in survival. She returned her attention to the human. You came here alone because you knew we would underestimate you? Yes, he said, and because the jungle would not. Yes. The princess allowed a slow breath to leave her lungs. You risked your life. He shook his head slightly. Not really. She glanced at the predators behind him. For the first time, she did not see monsters. She saw a network. You believe this world chose you, she said. He corrected her gently. Humanity has protected worlds like this before. We learned that death worlds are not problems to solve. They are systems to respect. The jungle breeze moved lightly through the trees, the rustling leaves in quiet rhythm. Even from orbit, the atmosphere felt different. Elira straightened her posture. If we withdraw, what guarantees do we have? You will retain trade access to adjacent systems, he replied. You will avoid open conflict, and you will gain something more valuable. What is that? She asked. A lesson. The simplicity of his answer carried more weight than any threat could have. The princess looked once more at the massive predator resting beside him. It was not guarding him like prey. It was sharing space. She realized then that she had misjudged more than a single human. She had misjudged an entire species. Stand by, she said finally. I will consider your proposal. The transmission ended. On the command deck, no one spoke immediately. Outside the viewport, Karthos rotated slowly. He covered in green and shadow. Princess Elira knew one thing clearly now. The human had not come to fight. He had come to make sure she understood that if war began, it would not end the way she expected. The power shift. Princess Elira remained alone in the private strategy chamber for several long minutes after ending the transmission. The large, transparent wall in front of her showed Karthos turning slowly in space, clouds drifting across its surface like silent guardians. She had come to claim the planet as a resource zone. Instead, she was now calculating how close she had come to triggering a war she did not fully understand. General Varric entered quietly and stood beside her. You are weighing pride against survival, he said in a calm voice. I am weighing authority against wisdom, Elira replied without looking at him. If we withdraw, the council will question my strength. And if you advance, Varric asked. She did not answer immediately. Both of them knew the simulations had shown unacceptable losses. Even if the Velkari fleet overpowered the human response ships, the ground war would be brutal. The jungle would not behave like territory. It would behave like a weapon. On the main display, long-range sensors continued to track the faint distortions of cloaked human vessels. They were positioned carefully, far enough to avoid provocation, close enough to react instantly. It was a silent statement of capability. They never moved closer, Elira said slowly. No, Varric agreed. They never needed to. She turned toward the central command chamber again. Officers straightened as she entered. The atmosphere was tense but controlled, and every eye followed her movement. Open full-spectrum scan of the human fleet, she ordered. The tactical officers expanded the projection. The cloaked signatures sharpened slightly under deep analysis. The vessels were not enormous war cruisers. They were medium-class ships with modular designs, adaptive shielding, environmental deployment bays, rapid response strike capability. "They are not invasion vessels," one officer observed. "No," Varric said quietly. "They are flexible." Princess Aelira studied the data carefully. Humanity had not sent overwhelming force. They had sent calculated force, enough to deter, not enough to escalate without reason. Below, the human remained in the jungle basin. The predators had relaxed further, some lying down completely. The largest one stayed near him, its armored body still and steady like a mountain. "He trusts that we will think," Aelira murmured. "Yes," Varric replied. "That is the real display of power." A communication alert flashed again. The human had reopened the channel, but this time without a direct message. Instead, data streamed through. Planetary biosphere statistics, ecosystem stability models, records of human protection interventions on similar worlds. "He is educating us," an officer said quietly. Aelira allowed the data to fill the chamber. The numbers were precise. Humanity had prevented 3 ecological collapses in outer systems. In 2 cases, they had repelled aggressive expansion fleets without destroying them. In every case, they had restored planetary balance rather than strip resources. "They do not conquer death worlds," she said slowly. They preserve them." Varric inclined his head slightly, "because they know what happens when balance breaks." Princess Aelira felt the final resistance inside her weaken. Strength was not only domination, it was restraint backed by capability. "Open channel," she ordered. The human's image returned once more. He appeared exactly as before, calm, steady, patient. "I have reviewed your data," Aelira said. "And?" he asked. "You were correct about the treaty," she admitted, "and about the cost of conflict." The human gave a slight nod, but did not smile. "However," she continued, "understand this clearly. The Velkari Empire does not retreat out of fear." "I would not expect you to," he replied. "We withdraw because calculation shows this world is not worth the instability it would create." "That is a wise calculation," he said evenly. Aelira held his gaze. "But I want something in return." The predators behind him remained still, their presence a quiet reminder that she was negotiating on unusual ground. "Name it," the human said. "Knowledge exchange," she replied. "Your methods of environmental integration. Access to non-sensitive data regarding planetary stabilization. If we are to expand responsibly, we will need such understanding." The human considered her request for a moment. "That can be arranged." The simplicity of his answer surprised her again. "You agree easily," she observed. "Because cooperation is cheaper than war," he said. "Why, and because misunderstanding is dangerous." Princess Aelira allowed herself a small nod. "Then hear my command. The Velkari fleet will withdraw from Carthos orbit immediately. All expansion markers will be removed. This planet will be recognized under treaty protection." The command deck received her order and began execution protocols. Engines adjusted. Orbital paths shifted slowly away from the planet. Below, the jungle responded almost instantly. The synchronized predator signatures softened. Movement patterns returned to natural distribution. The massive creature beside the human lifted its head slightly, then relaxed again. The human looked upward toward the departing fleet. "Thank you, Princess," he said. She hesitated before responding. "I misjudged you." "Yes," he said honestly. You are not merely a rookie." He gave the smallest hint of humor in his eyes. "On Earth, rookies are sent where experience is earned. And apex predators step aside for them," she said quietly. "They step aside for those who understand the rules," he corrected. The transmission ended one final time. As the star of Velkar increased its distance from Karthos, Princess Elira remained watching until the planet became smaller in the viewport. She felt no humiliation. Instead, she felt something far more valuable: perspective. General Varric stood beside her once more. "You have prevented a war," he said. "No," she replied softly. "A human rookie prevented a war." Varric allowed himself the faintest smile. "That may be the most impressive part." Far below, in the jungle basin, the human finally turned away from the massive predator, where the creatures slowly dispersed into the forest, returning to their territories. The ecosystem settled back into its quiet rhythm. For the human, the mission was complete. For Princess Elira, the lesson had just begun. Respect earned. The Velkari fleet moved steadily away from Karthos, engines glowing softly as the massive ships adjusted their course toward open space. Inside the command deck of the Star of Velkar, there was no celebration and no visible frustration. There was something more powerful than either emotion. There was reflection. Princess Elira stood before the central display, watching the green world shrink in the distance. She understood that this moment would be recorded in imperial history, but not as a defeat. It would be recorded as a decision. "Transmission received from the human," an officer announced quietly. "Put it through," Elira said. The image of the jungle appeared once more. The human now stood alone in the clearing. The massive apex predator that had remained beside him earlier had disappeared back into the forest. The air looked calmer. The tension that once filled the basin was gone. It was as if the planet itself had relaxed. "The fleet is withdrawing," the human said, not as a question but as confirmation. "It is," Elira replied. "Your world remains under treaty protection." "It was never my world," he corrected gently. "It protects itself. We simply ensure others understand that." There was no arrogance in his tone, no pride, just clarity. Princess Elira studied him carefully one last time. He did not look like a conqueror. He did not look like a hero. He looked like a professional completing routine work. "You called yourself a rookie," she said slowly. "I want to understand something. If this is the level of your beginners, what does your veteran look like?" The human paused for a moment before answering. "Veterans do not need to come to places like this." The answer carried more meaning than the words alone. Elira felt a small but genuine smile form. "Then I am glad we only met a rookie." The human allowed the faintest sign of humor to cross his expression. "So am I." For a brief moment there was silence between them, not uncomfortable, but thoughtful. Two leaders from different species, both young in their own ways, both learning something important. "You requested knowledge exchange," the human said. "Our data package has been transmitted. It includes environmental response models and non-classified integration protocols." "It has been received," Elira confirmed. "In return, the Velkari Empire will adjust its expansion review process. Death worlds will no longer be categorized as resource-first targets." "That is a wise change," he replied. She hesitated before speaking again. "You stood alone against an empire." "No," he said calmly. "I stood with a planet." That statement remained with her long after the transmission ended. The screen faded, and the jungle view disappeared. Karthos continued turning slowly below, peaceful and undisturbed. Princess Elira turned to General Varric. "Prepare an official record entry." Varric inclined his head slightly. She spoke clearly, knowing her words would be archived in imperial memory. "On this cycle, the Velkari expansion was halted at Karthos due to treaty recognition and planetary defense capability. Human representative demonstrated advanced ecological integration beyond projected models. Future engagements with humanity will require reassessment of strategic assumptions." She paused briefly, then added something not required by protocol. "Note this as well. Never mistake a human for weak. Even their rookies walk where apex predators make way. The officers recorded her statement without comment. As the fleet reached safe jump distance, hyperspace coordinates were locked in. Engines charged. In the jungle below, the human began walking back toward his shuttle. The forest no longer formed a protective circle around him. The predators had returned to their normal paths. Yet as he moved through the trees, and several massive shapes watched from a distance. Not with hostility, not with submission, with acknowledgement. When he reached the shuttle clearing, he paused for a moment and looked back at the endless green canopy. The mission log activated automatically in his helmet. "Environmental integration successful," he said in a calm, measured tone. "Velkari fleet withdrawn, biosphere stable." There was no mention of danger, no dramatic summary. Just another assignment completed. The shuttle lifted smoothly into the sky, disappearing into the cloud layer. Far beyond orbit, cloaked human ships adjusted formation and began their own quiet withdrawal. No victory signals, no celebration transmissions. For humanity, protecting a death world was not glory. It was responsibility. Aboard the Star of Velkar, Princess Aelira watched the final human signatures fade from sensor range. She did not feel defeated. She felt sharpened, stronger not because she had conquered something, but because she had chosen not to. General Varric stepped beside her once more. "You have learned quickly," he said. "I had a good teacher," she replied. "Who?" he asked. "The rookie." Moments later, the Velkari fleet entered hyperspace, leaving Karthos untouched behind them. On Earth, deep within a quiet operations facility, a report appeared on a central screen. One line summarized the event clearly. "Protected world secure, rookie assessment complete." No medals were issued, no public announcement was made, because for humanity, it was simply another day proving a truth the galaxy was only beginning to understand. Even their rookies are apex.